Having discussed my overall impression of Firefly Life Signs, as well as the things I liked about the book, now I'm turning my attention to the things I found disappointing about the novel. There will be spoilers in this video, and in general I'm going to be going into a little bit more detail and being a bit more nitpicky than I was in the previous video. And I don't want this to come across as mean-spirited or being overly critical. As I said, I did enjoy the book a lot, but I just felt it contained a few mistakes and poor, for lack of a better word, directorial decisions. And these missteps, in my opinion, prevent the book from going from good to great or excellent. So there are a number of just straight continuity errors, and I feel that these are particularly annoying because all it would take is a good continuity editor to catch these, and they would require only like small amendments to the text to fix. They wouldn't radically alter the story or plot by changing them. So firstly, Lovegrove seems to think that Inara is in House Madrasa on Sinon in the movie, as he hints at her returning there after the events of the novel, and he also suggests that she briefly stayed there before this novel, apparently having been left there in Those Left Behind. And this is just not true. The movie doesn't say that, none of the comics say that. Inara doesn't return to House Madrasa. She's not allowed to. In the movie, Inara is picked up from a new training house that has been recently established on a Rimworld planet. Like, there's no ambiguity about this, but it certainly feels like Lovegrove has missed this fact and is reflecting details which are incorrect. The most egregious error, however, comes in a conversation between Inara and Mal when she refers to Fiddler's Green and talks about how she told Mal about her involvement in that event. And it is true that they have this conversation. The problem is that they do so about 2 years after the movie, and this book is set sometime in the year preceding the movie. Inara and Mal just shouldn't have had this conversation yet, and yet they reference it in this novel. The following is maybe less an error and more of a choice, but I felt it was a disappointing choice. Simon should probably have known about Inara's cancer. In Better Days, there's a mysterious scene in which Simon is seen leaving Inara's shuttle. The reason for his being there is never explained, but Inara hints that he was visiting in his capacity as a doctor. It was clear to me that this was supposed to be a clue to this storyline about Inara having some terminal disease. But it felt like Lovegrove had chosen to ignore that, when really it ought to have been woven into this story. Like, this scene in Better Days now has no explanation. And to me, it felt like Lovegrove was sort of picking and choosing which clues he wanted to incorporate into the resolution of this story arc. And I don't think that you can do that. I think to be a good chapter of a larger story, you need to acknowledge and align with everything, not just what is convenient. If your plot conflicts with pre-established events, change the plot. Don't ignore the events. While the foreshadowing of River becoming the pilot of Serenity was sort of fun, I think it also constitutes a continuity error. Like, there's no way that Wash, realizing that River is a competent, even talented pilot, wouldn't mention that to Mal. And yet at the end of the movie, Mal is reasonably surprised to witness River's competence behind Serenity's yoke.
Oh, you gonna ride shotgun with me? Help me fly?
That's the plan.
Think you can work out? Okay. Clearly some aptitude for the...
Moving on to character continuity errors, where I feel like the character arcs and the personalities of the characters don't match where they should be at this point in the Firefly timeline. There were a number of decisions that I felt made parts of the movie make less sense in retrospect. In the movie, for instance, Mal is a much darker individual than we've seen him in the series. In particular, his relationship with Simon has soured considerably, to the point that Simon quits the ship at the end of the first act in the movie. It's very difficult to buy Mal treating Simon like this, given that Simon is largely responsible for saving Inara, and it feels like Mal should be forever indebted to Simon and to a lesser extent River, and it makes it harder to accept his treatment of them in the movie as being realistic. The movie is unambiguous that Inara left the ship due to mal in some way. Like, watch these clips.
Captain will drive us all off one by one. Just like Simon and River. Just like Inara.
You've never been but a way station to those two, and how do you know what he feels? Oh, he's got River to worry on, but he's still gonna show you. If I truly wanted someone bad enough, wouldn't be a thing in the verse could stop me from going to her.
Tell that to Inara.
These lines just don't really make sense given what we see in the novel. In Life Signs, it's established that Inara left Serenity solely because her cancer had moved into its final stages. What's more, in Life Signs, Mal fully accepts that he's in love with Inara, and Inara opts to remain on Bellerophon. There's no element of Mal driving Inara away remaining in this novel. So Kaylees' words now seem totally unjustified and more than a little insensitive. And finally, I think the biggest problem with Life Signs is River's characterization. Now, it must be said that River's characterization has consistently been a weak link in all of Titan's Firefly novels, with the possible exception of The Ghost Machine. Both Lovegrove and Leben have displayed a problem understanding how much of River's abilities are known to the crew prior to the movie, and the correct answer is virtually nothing. And yet most of these books have River's combat prowess out on show, even though the other characters should be virtually ignorant of her abilities until the movie. But Life Signs' River problem is less to do with her abilities and more to do with her state of mind. In common with Generations, Life Signs portrays River as far more lucid than she should be. River is portrayed in both the series and movie as being damaged. She is demonstrably out of touch with reality. The other characters treat her as they might treat a child who doesn't really understand the world yet. For most of the series, she's little more than a plot device, devoid of her own agency until the movie. Even in Objects in Space, where arguably she does display a great deal of coherent purpose and agency, the manner in which she exhibits it betrays her broken mind. She doesn't deal with Early in an efficient and pragmatic manner. She toys with him, pretending to ethereally possess the spaceship, and on some level, River does feel as though she is possessing Serenity. We see throughout the series, but particularly in this episode, the River is intimately connected to that spaceship. In her mind, she and the ship are deeply spiritually connected. That episode even opens with a sequence that shows that River doesn't perceive the world around her the same way everyone else does. And yet in Life Signs, River is portrayed not as damaged or insane, but as almost entirely lucid throughout, and maybe just a little bit odd or quirky. She takes control of the situation she's placed in, perceiving the danger and the opportunities presented perfectly. She assumes a leadership role and deals with Kaylee, unconscious Wash, and outmaneuvering the Alliance, all on her own, with a great clarity of thought. And this isn't like a non-issue. River being damaged is an important element of the overall story. It's a constant reminder of the evils of the Alliance. And her being damaged and putting herself back together is River's arc in the movie and beyond. In this book, she doesn't come across as damaged, just a bit odd. Odd is not something that needs repairing. It's not something that River needs to overcome, come to terms with, move past. River's story is one of being abused, rescued, and eventually of recovery, hopefully. It's necessary that River is portrayed as damaged prior to the movie for that character arc to have punch. I believe it was also a misstep to give River this starring role in the B story of Life Signs, like all the stuff that's happening up in space, with the kind of like the space acrobatics, avoiding the Alliance sort of thing. In my opinion, that should have been a Wash/Kaylee-led affair. River has had so much time in the spotlight. She's the star player of the movie, savior in Objects in Space. She has a prominent role in Leaves on the Wind, saves the day in The Ghost Machine, and she drives the plot in Generations. Wash, on the other hand, gets one episode, War Stories, which he doesn't even really get to himself because he shares it with Mal and Zoe. Kaylee doesn't even really have a story in which she steps fully into the spotlight. Wash is a finite character. He doesn't survive the movie. There's limited opportunities for him to be the star, and this was an opportunity, and it was missed. River is absolutely, potentially, the most interesting character of the series, but we should be exploring that after the movie. Okay, the sane River, the River that has her mind back after the Miranda incident has been broadcast, the sane River is ripe for exploration, and we kind of see that in this book because River is portrayed as being sane, but we're seeing this too soon. This shouldn't be something that's explored in a story that happens before the movie. It doesn't really make sense. My advice for this story would have been to set it after the movie, either between Leaves on the Wind and No Power in the Verse, or after No Power in the Verse, right at the very end of the chronology. This would have allowed the B story to be River-led, which it basically already is, but it would allow it to be River-led without it damaging her character arc in the movie. And I feel like this placement would have been more advised too because of the A story. If this book was set at the end of the chronology, I could have reasonably been fooled into believing that Mal might fail to save Inara. However, because it's set before the movie, before I even opened this book, I knew that Mal was going to ultimately be successful. Regardless of how dire the novel tried to portray the situation, I knew Mal was ultimately going to be successful. If the story had been set right at the end of the chronology, maybe I could have been fooled into thinking that Titan were going to be incredibly bold and kill off a main character in their novels. I probably still would have doubted it, but it would certainly have been possible. It would have been in my mind. A post-movie placement for this story, it would have just avoided all the kind of disjointedness that placing it between the series and the movie has caused. Like, the story doesn't feel like it fits in this place in the timeline very well. Set after the movie, I think it would have fitted in far better. It would have just solved just about every continuity problem without really changing much of what this story really is. I think that Life Signs is indicative of a problem that I first perceived in Firefly Generations when it comes to Titan's approach to this series. Titan seems really interested in publishing Firefly novels which are good in their own right, for the most part, but without caring too much about how well they sit in the larger saga. And for a fan, this is just a bit disappointing. It doesn't feel unreasonable to expect both a good story and one that fits comfortably into the larger saga, especially given how small and digestible the Firefly canon is. I think this problem is particularly evident in Life Signs because it is explicitly picking up a plot thread from the series, more so than any other novel. Life Signs' plot is inextricably linked to the series, and therefore the disjointedness created by this approach is highlighted. Picking up a dangling plot thread from the show was a bold decision from Titan, and that had the potential to deliver great dividends. This could have been like an absolute classic Firefly story, which was a crucial part of the overall canon. But ultimately, I think it was inappropriate given their modus operandi of prioritizing the quality of individual stories while caring less about their connectedness to the larger story. And again, I don't want this to come across as mean-spirited or overly demanding. These are entertaining books. James Lovegrove is an excellent, excellent choice for Firefly, in my opinion. I enjoy reading them immensely. But I'm starting to feel like the Firefly novels from Titan may always feel like a bit of a missed opportunity to make a really valuable and beloved and eventually classic addition to the Firefly canon, all because of a slight carelessness. Well, those are my thoughts. If you have any, I'd love to hear them.